You will almost likely know what the Demons list is, the collection of the top 50 hardest demon levels in Geometry Dash that is regularly reviewed and researched by a team of players and creators. It's a cornerstone of the community and is now more relevant, useful and well run than ever before on account of its amazing new website and brand. But as you will all know, this well-made website and unit of organisers traces its roots back to the GD forums, when the list was far less evolved. Sometimes screenshots and entries from old lists emerge on Twitter, Discord and the GD forums, but have you ever wondered what the list was like back before 2.0 and the new era of Geometry Dash? Well, that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going back to mid 1.9 when some of the earliest centralizations of Demon List rankings started on the forum, and we're going to cover a quick-fire history of the top 50 hardest demons list. Also, before we begin, I'd like to shout out one of the most important list analysts, NOICE'S, for helping me make this video and supplying resources, so go and check him out. Enjoy, guys. So let's quickly just talk about what life was like before the list. Ranking GD demons was far more arbitrary. The only real way to get any sort of ranking was to look up top 10 videos, and a lot of these were miles off. One of the most famous and one of the first GD videos I ever watched was this one, Top 5 Hardest Impossible GD Levels by Not Just PK. It was one of the biggest for its time with nearly 500,000 views, but now we look at it, it's so inaccurate. At number 5, Cataclysm was included. At number 4, it's an early version of Sakub in Hell. At number 3, Ice Cub and Diablo X. At number 2, Red World. And at number 1, The Big Black by Alex and Game. A medium rated demon now. Obviously, some of these demons were viewed differently at the time, and you may see my point. At nearly 500,000 views, there was such a huge market for these videos. There was a list before run by Lugia, but he was too inactive, and so along came IFRESTERNOCH'S and made a list back in April 2015, about halfway through 1.9. So let's take a look at it. Now, it's fair to say that IFRESTERNOCH'S list had some inaccuracies. Obviously, level attitudes change, but there was an element of poor research here to some degree. But for such an early and large project, it's a decent and interesting read. This list is a top 25 and not a top 50, and it has ranks. The top 10 were labelled as Extreme and Impossible, followed by Insane Demons. Then it had 25 bonus maps and a list of non-demon maps. Let's take a look at the top 25. The top 10 is a very different picture to what it is now. At number 1 we have Ice Cub and Diablo X by Roadblows, the hardest map since 1.6. This list also came at a time when Ice Cub and Diablo X was viewed as harder than Cataclysm, which is further down the list. At number 2 we have Alphabet X. Seriously, Alphabet X is an insane demon now, but looking back you might be wondering how it was even considered harder than Cataclysm. Well, Alphabet X was actually one of the two levels released by Play 1107696 in 1.6 when Clubstep and Electro Man Adventures were released. Silent Club was the other couplet, but it is not considered on this list, as a player found a secret way that it had to verify it. We're not 100% sure who it was. We think it was most likely Cyclic, but it could have been a different member of GW, or anyone for that matter. Alphabet X was considered on the same level as Silent Club, but stayed rated. Zobros had 78% at this point, and no one could believe how close he was. At number 3 we have Cataclysm, and this was back when it was considered barely possible but on the same level as the first two. Don't forget, none of these 3 levels had a victor. Moving down the list, the next demon that sticks out is Stereo Demoness by Majako, much easier after its nerfed update, which allowed Crack to become the first to complete it, and earned Crack a collab with Majako on Dubcore. Stalemate heads up at number 7 by Nox, another 1.9 level that everyone was insane about due to its recent design and supposed difficulty. At number 9 we have Ice Cream, Cyclic's strange 1.5 level that is basically a pre-1.9 mirror of Conical Depression and what it is now. At number 10 we have Supersonic, a level that was released and one of the most famous mega collabs of the time. Souls TRK was the first to beat this, and a few others got in there very fast, given it was such a hype level with so much attention. Interestingly, at number 12 we have Necropolis. Necropolis stayed on the list for a very long time, but was underrated for a lot of that time too. It heads up at just above Acropolis by Zobros, a top 25 recent demon of the time. Moving into insane demons, at 17 we have Windy Landscape. Windy Landscape is a very historic demon, and this was removed from the list by Riot and Co. after they took it over, but before this it was still incredibly challenging and a feared level. Heading down at 22 we have Deadly Clubstep, another seriously insane demon that was one of the hardest challenges of the time, but soon had a lot of victors following the 1.9 update. And finally, to anchor our list we have Neon Overdrive. Looking down the list of honourable mentions, we have a few notable ones. Breakthrough, Back on Mountain, Fairy Dust, 9 Circles, and Treasure Mine. On the unrated section, Red World remained the king of unrated demons, and if rated would have been number 1 above Ice Cub and Diablo X. Silent Clubstep and Deadly Clubstep version 2, 2 impossible levels by Salient, head up underneath this, just to give you a sense of how hard people saw Red World at the time. We also had Skrillex Right In, interestingly, a hard demon level that was once viewed as impossible. Interestingly, there was no Hell series levels, but these levels kind of got lost in the Korean community folklore after they were unrated, and it was only Cyclic who brought them back in 2.0. So that was one of the first earliest ever surviving demon lists. That was quite an interesting read, to be honest. I quite enjoyed reading and writing about this. Anyway, on to the next one. The list maintained for a few months, and we have another copy from August the 19th, just under 2 years ago. This list was updated only a few days after Bloodbath was rated, and in 4 months the picture changed quite a lot. At number 1 we have Bloodbath, the legendary demon of the time, built to be harder than anything before. It quite deservedly sat at number 1. At number 2 we have Future Demoness by Majako, which hadn't long been released. Now I'm not sure what the situation is here. Obviously I know Future Demoness was much harder before its update, and that is what caused it to be ranked number 1 on the list before Bloodbath was rated. That being said, I thought Koreacore and Sandstorm beat the nerfed version of it, but this list seems to hold that they beat the harder version. I don't know what's going on here, and I don't know if IFRESTERNOC'S thought it was still harder than Cataclysm or what, but I'm not going to try and guess on the reasoning behind its placing, or for what happened, or when the update happened. At number 3 we have Cataclysm, which had been moved above Ice Cub and Diablo X after Riot beat both and declared Cataclysm harder. But Cataclysm had been dethroned by Bloodbath and Future Demoness. Given how hard Cataclysm was, it's actually interesting how little time it spent as number 1 on the Demons list. At number 5 and number 6 we have the Ultimate Phase and Creeper Force. The Ultimate Phase is arguably harder, but Creeper Force had only just been added to the list, and so people viewed it as much harder because it was newer. At number 7 we have Effort by Spectro. Again, much harder before an update that Spectro gave it. It stayed on the list for a long time given its length, to be fair. Necropolis was moved up after being underrated on the last list, and so heads up at 8th. Alphabet X had its place re-evaluated on account of 4 new victors starting with Zobros all the way down to Sagayesta, so IFRESTERNOC'S realised it wasn't completely impossible. Supersonic carried on maintaining its position, and was soon followed by Ato, a new addition to the list that was an insane demon. Poltergeist was released following this, and was added at place 18th, as the hardest rated Circles level at the time. After this, the similar additions from the last list are just being pushed down, and new entries are at the top that we've already mentioned. The Honourable Mentions list got an upgrade. 9-Step, Theory of Everything 2 version 2, Antimatter, and a few others all entered this list. The non-demons list stayed much the same, only with the addition of a very early version of Hell Factory published on Saturn's account. Interestingly, there's a section that listed demons that used to qualify but don't qualify anymore because of updates, and the Janus Miracle featured in this, and this was the version that we know now that was recently restored, and was restored to the list following the new group taking over. That's pretty much all there is to the update for this list. For our next step, we have to use the web saving tool known as WAYBACK Machine in order to pick up saved copies of the old list. IFRESTERNOC'S list soon became obsolete as it inspired a team of new people to take it over. A team of Razor, Riot, Michigan, Heinz and Zobros created their own new list in 2.0 and made it a bit more accurate given the playing backing that could be used to justify a level placing. They also extended it to a top 40 instead of a top 25 and generally brought it quite a bit forward in the right direction. We can't actually see any particularly early copies of this, but that's not too much of a problem, as the 2.0 revolution that started to see the list really shift didn't start till about January. Our earliest entry is November 2015, so we'll be able to track this. Some small changes headed up to some of the orders on the list. Future Demoness was dropped, Windy Landscape was removed, Bloodbath and Cataclysm and Ice Cub and Diablo X marked places 1, 2 and 3. Creeper Force still maintained its position above the Ultimate Phase, and Madhouse by Green and Moore was added at place 6th. In November, we started to see a couple of early Hack 2.0 levels creep in. Demonic Base and Lezikov before its update made place 8th and place 10th. Landect was eventually placed 10th shortly after, but when our earliest capture was created, it was placed 12th. Future Demoness and Alphabet X made up 15th and 16th. Galactic Fragility was verified towards the end of 1.9 and sat at 70. Antique Circles was added at place 18th, above Crimson Clutter, providing Andromeda's motivation to rank Antique Circles number 1 in his hardest 9 circles list that he made. At 22nd, Ultrasonic came in, another demon at the end of 1.9 which failed to be added to FRESTERNOCH'S list. We also have the short rise of El Dorado as one of the most well-defined New Age timing demons descended from Acropolis. Ultraviolet was verified and added, and Supersonic fell to 30th. Infernity, a strange semicircles level by Joe 2000, made 35th, as some of the more veteran hard demons from 1.9 such as Swing Squad made up the majority of the rest. A non-demon list was carried over too, but Red World was actually demoted to 6th, below an early version of Succubin Hell. Interestingly, Fexty made this infamous demons list, with many still fearing its difficulty. It's interesting how some of the levels from this impossible list are starting to go. Red World, Elite Z and End of the World have all since been verified. On to our next entry, and we start to track this particular list over the course of a year. In January 2016, the list was extended to a top 50 and coined the famous top 50 we know today. The most striking change is Phobos. An early, unnerfed version of Phobos was featured almost immediately by Rottob, and despite being harder than Bloodbath, was still put at number 2. A few small changes followed. Crimson Clutter was raised, Down Bass was added, the Riot version that is. Interestingly, the number 50 at this point became Poltergeist. Everything held firm up until the end of January when Phobos was removed and the Hell Factory was featured and became the undisputed number 2 demon. Moving into March, we waited a long time for A Bizarre Phantasm to finally be rated, and it was hugely underrated to begin with, being placed below Cataclysm and the Hell Factory. A fun little fact here is that on April the 1st the list was changed to an April Fool's one, and on the Creeper Force entry, Creeper MLK's name was changed to Creeper Milk, and it's actually never been changed back to this day. Go to the Point to Create list now and look it up and you will see Creeper Milk. Early April's entry saw Conical Depression rated, but interestingly and contrary to popular belief, it was placed below the Hell Factory initially, and this was because people were still not over the fact that Hell Factory had been impossible and was now verified. Crimson Clutter was promoted to a top 10 demon, and Catastrophic was placed one place below. Moving into May, the moderators still continued to have trouble deciding the order of their top 5. The Hell Factory was no longer second and was demoted to 4th. Conical Depression remained in 3rd, and A Bizarre Phantasm was upgraded to 2nd. Everything else continued to stay relatively similar, although Acropolis and Supersonic were gone during this period, and Alphabet X and Effort were on the verge of slipping out too. Shortly after, Conical Depression found its perch in 2nd place. Effort received a lifeline and was raised back up to 41st place. Downbase was also moved on account of its update following the Riot version, and Crimson Clutter was boosted too. At the end of May, Phobos was re-verified and rated again and hit 2nd place. Photovoltaic was also added to the top 10 as another hard mega collab that was verified. Creeper Force was forced away from the ultimate phase and Necropolis fell out of the top 10 altogether. After this, we begin to get into the period that most people joined the list and the traffic started increasing. Red World Rebirth was added at place 5th, followed by Plasma Pulse 3 and so on. In August 2016, things got a bit interesting. Betrayal of Fate by WeoWeoTeo was added at 2nd place, though this caused a bit of a hacking drama. We had a few new familiar entries after this, Heartbeat, Acropolis, and so on. Future Demoness prepared to fall off the list too. Come September, Betrayal of Fate was dropped to 5th, and then Succubin Hell was re-verified, a level that would eventually go on to be the number 1, but maintained the number 2nd place for a while. Following this, the old list that we're using was deleted. There were 2 list deletions, one of which was by Riot and the other was accidental. And I think this may have been the accidental one, as I recall Magosty providing the moderators with a backup to make the new one. But this thread isn't widely viewed or even available on Wayback Machine. But that's okay, because luckily your boy C1997 has no life and can remember most of what went on. Come September time, Succubin Hell was moved to number 1. Athanatos was verified in November and became number 1 for a while. After this we can use G-News to track the list. Athanatos was moved to 2nd by Sonic Wave, before being put to 4th in a reshuffle. Artificial Ascent was then initially placed at number 1 before Sonic Wave was moved above. Obviously Yatigarasu came into the mix, and then so did Erebus and Bausha Vortex in early 2.1 to give us a top 5 that has only just been changed by Zafkill. In April 2016, list moderators unveiled a new demons list on Pointer Crate, and since then we've been able to track and watch every move on the list with G-News and the help of the Legacy Demons list. It's a shame really, because the list once contained a wide spectrum of levels, and now the top 50 is just an elite players club of insane and extreme demons. Before, only 5 or 6 levels were considered extreme, and now loads of them are. It kind of takes the soul away in my opinion, and that's not anyone's fault really, but it's still a little bit disappointing somewhat. I hope you've enjoyed learning about the Demons List from mid 1.9 to mid 2.1. There's certainly a lot of interesting history. I'm considering doing another list video, either a documentary or something like that, but I'll be working much more closely with NOICE and Co on that one. I thank you for watching this video and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like, and if you could subscribe, it would really help me out. Thanks a lot guys, I'll see you all soon.